Hello, folks. I'm Dr. Call, back as promised for World Diabetes Day. Now, I do go on about diabetes a lot, and you might wonder, there she is again. And those of you who've naturally come here because you're interested in diabetes will find that there's a bonus at the end of this little podcast. But those of you who are now turning away and wondering, what does it have to do with me? Let me try and persuade you that this is a matter that concerns all of us. So if you thought you weren't touched by diabetes, I suggest you bring a drink, a beverage, anything, a snack perhaps of your choice. Take a sit down and let's talk. First off, a lot of people believe that diabetes happens because of eating too much sugar. Are you one of these people? Well, if you are, you're gravely mistaken. Then there are people who believe that diabetes is all about family. So if somebody in the family has diabetes, your risk of diabetes goes up. Partially true, but that's not all there is to it. Then there are those who believe that diabetes only happens in old people. Oh, really? Yeah, okay, well, let's try and explain that to the 30-year-old who had a stroke last year in IT, working behind a desk 80, 90 hours a week. And finally, there are people who think that diabetes happens only to the rich because they can afford to have rich people problems. Well, some of the leading countries with diabetes are Brazil, Russia, China, and India. These don't register as rich countries generally, do they now? So let's backtrack and think about diabetes. What is it? Is it a real problem? Are we avoiding it, or are we just blindsided somehow by this perfect brewing storm? To begin with, do you realize that diabetes claims a life every 7 seconds? Well, that's more than HIV/AIDS. And you might not really see how big of a problem that is, but HIV/AIDS is a contagious disease, whereas diabetes, as far as we know, is non-communicable. In other words, it isn't passed from one person to another through bacteria, virus, or any other form of vector. The other thing a lot of people don't realize is that diabetes is not just a one-off incident. It's not a simple condition. It's something that exists with an individual for the rest of their life. Even those who successfully reverse diabetes in their cases, who manage to improve their lifestyle and bring back control to their life, are always going to be at risk. There's no such thing as a cure so far, from either type 1 or type 2 diabetes. Now you might wonder, maybe you wonder that diabetes does affect you. And if so, let's break it down a little bit further. The human body, from the moment we're born, begins aging. That's right, the moment you conceive, you start aging. But diabetes is one of those conditions that actually ages you tremendously faster. What it means is that if you have the lifespan of a 100-year-old, that you may live to be 100, with a condition like diabetes, you could tremendously reduce that lifespan. And whatever little life you do have, it's most likely not the best quality, because you're riddled with pains in the form of neuropathy. You are riddled with the high risk of sudden death because of heart disease or kidney disease. You have the possibility of going blind because of diabetic eye disease, or retinopathy is the other word for it. Or, if you're also unlucky, you may not be able to pass on your genes. You might be infertile because of diabetes. So I hope this helps in some way to appreciate that there are a number of complications that come from diabetes. The other thing we need to understand very often is that diabetes is not just a simple condition of one factor going up or one factor going down in the human body. Diabetes is not so much a disease as it is a cluster of syndromes that manifest as high blood glucose. What that basically means is that in individuals, more often than not, high blood pressure, high obesity, which is just to say being overweight but to a dangerous extent, high blood cholesterols, body fats or blood fats I should say, all of these come together to produce something which the body can no longer fight against, which the body can no longer bring back to basal levels. And that essentially is diabetes. So when you hear about these miracle workers who will cure diabetes for you, who will take you to a boot camp and restore your health, Well, that's not completely wrong, because will you believe it? The first line of defense against diabetes, especially type 2, is lifestyle change. It's diet and exercise. Really that simple. Some people will, and doctors of course, will prescribe metformin as well. What this does is it improves insulin sensitivity, which really is the core problem with diabetes. Too often, what lies at the heart of diabetes is that the body fails to recognize insulin. It fails to understand how to react to insulin sufficiently, which is why it fails to take away the extra glucose from circulation. And that extra glucose in circulation causes spikes, which basically throw the body off. In the long run, they can be very detrimental to your different organ systems, from the eyes, to the kidney, to the brain. They really affect every single organ system. So coming back to the topic of these miracle workers and healers of diabetes, they're not lying. The only point is a boot camp all you need? Or do you need to understand that there's more to just that 1 week or a month of boot camp? Diabetes is a lifestyle disease, for the most part, for most people. Therefore, the only way of overcoming it is a lifestyle change. Well, this ranges straight from exercise to diet to occasionally some drugs also. Where do you begin to understand whether or not diabetes affects you? Well, why don't we start with me as an example? Because really, I couldn't ask you to understand it unless I can break it down for you from the standpoint of somebody else. Maybe this is going to make it a bit more relatable for you too. As a woman in her 30s, why do I care about diabetes? Well, quite simply, because a very large portion of the individuals on this planet are now pre-diabetic. And I could be one of them. Because our foods are now very heavy on preservatives, additional sneaky salts and sugars that we aren't always aware of. And even if I am very conscientious about my meals and my exercise, I may be consuming things that I'm not fully aware of, which increase my risk of insulin resistance and lower sensitivities in the long run. As a woman, I also understand that if I have so much as pre-diabetes and not full-blown diabetes, I stand the risk of heart disease and also infertility. This is true for nearly all women. In fact, it's a large part of why so many women now suffer from infertility. And the other thing is my ethnicity. As somebody from Southeast Asia, I intrinsically have fewer mitochondria. I intrinsically have lower muscle mass. What this means is that my oxidation of fats is different from that of somebody in, let's say, who was raised in the Caucasian belt, so to speak. Somebody who is of origins from Europe, for example. What does that mean? It means that I don't actually have to be morbidly obese in order to be at a risk of diabetes. And folks like me also run a high risk of diabetes at a much lower body weight. That's just my story, though. What's yours? I'd like for you to think about whether you know anybody, either your family, your friends, anybody you know in your circle who has diabetes, and think of how it might affect you. And now for the bonus section. So for those of you who stuck around this long and would like to know what we have to offer in our bonus, we're really just looking at some high intensity interval training circuits that we'd like to suggest that you try as a challenge. And why, you might ask, would you do this? Well, fitness is a great way of fighting and combating diabetes. Also, it's a great way of keeping away depression, and it is a great way of keeping in shape and being more confident with your body and just overall improving the quality of your life. So stick around. There will be a link. If you subscribe, then you will be given a password to a playlist specifically with these circuits, and we'd like for you to try them out. And when you do, tag us, let us know on whichever social media using hashtag World Diabetes Day 2017, and we'll take it from there. I'm so eager to see what you guys get up to. And as a final note, we're trying to organize something in Columbus, Ohio for World Diabetes Day 2017, which is the 14th of November. So if you'd like to volunteer, if you live around here, or if you know anybody who'd be interested, get them to get in touch. It'll be fun. We'll get together, we'll do some yoga, we'll help people prep meals and understand how to do meal preps in order to have a slightly healthier life. And it'll be fun. So, get in touch, volunteer, and engage with us. Meanwhile, stay fit, stay healthy.